Today we will be talking about the Mr. Mercedes trilogy that starts off with the self-titled book, Mr. Mercedes, followed by Finder's Keeper, and then it ends on End of Watch. Mr. Mercedes, if you haven't already either read it or watched the show, it's about a psychopath who steals a woman's Mercedes, and there was a group of people waiting out of a building at a job fair. He plows this Mercedes into them, killing multiple people, including, sadly, a baby. And our main character, our main protagonist, is this detective, Bill Hodges. When we are introduced to Hodges, he is already retired, he's miserable, and he's actually ready to commit suicide with his own service gun. Because at the end of his career is when the accident involving Mr. Mercedes happened, and he ended up retiring while it was still unsolved. After a year or so, I believe, the man who is known as Mr. Mercedes, who is Brady Hartsfield, decides that he's going to torment Bill and the woman he stole the car from. So he ended up causing the woman he stole the car from, Olivia Trilogy, to commit suicide because he hacked her computer. He put at random intervals babies crying, people crying, and she ultimately assumed it was the ghost of the victims who died at the hands of her car. So she ends up killing herself. And then eventually, on the day in which Bill Hodges was ready to kill himself, he receives a message from Mr. Mercedes, and it's just tormenting him, pretty much saying, come find me, or, you can't solve this. And then it ended up making Hodges desperate to solve the case. So he goes on to pursue the case, try to figure out who this Mr. Mercedes is. And in the pursuit, he met Olivia Trilogy's sister when he went to go investigate the aftermath of Miss Olivia Trilogy passing away. So he meets Janie, who is Miss Trilogy's sister. They end up getting involved, dating. He's actually kind of shocked at the fact that they start dating because she's younger than him. This is an older man. They begin to have a relationship as they investigate into who Mr. Mercedes is. And then, sadly, they are at an event. Janie ends up putting on Bill Hodges' hat and going into a car. Brady blows up the car thinking that he killed Bill Hodges, but he really just killed Janie. And this propels Hodges to actually pursue even harder and harder because he's just really pissed off that this dude just keeps killing people. He ends up meeting Holly. Holly is Janie's kind of socially awkward cousin. He ends up using her to help him ultimately track down and stop Brady from actually blowing up a concert of kids. Now, Brady, he is a psychopath. There's no doubt about that. He lost his father at the age of 8, and then he actually killed his mentally handicapped brother, who his mom coerced him into. And then somehow he develops an incestuous relationship with his mother, which I was not feeling because that's disgusting. He ends up having a relationship with his mother. On one occasion, he went to go kill a dog that belonged to Hodges' kind of like neighbor, teenage friend that helps him also to track down Hartsfield. He put a ton of poison in hamburger meat, and his mother stumbles upon it. She eats it, ultimately dies. And because he kills his mother, he decides that he's going to commit suicide, but he just didn't want to take his own life. He wanted to go out with a bang. So he went to this concert pretending that he was disabled in a wheelchair when in fact he had bombs hiding within the mechanics of the wheelchair. But the team of Jerome and Holly and Bill ultimately discover what he was planning to do. They go to the concert, and Holly ends up saving everybody by continuously hitting Brady, causing massive blows to the head, causing brain trauma. He ends up going to a hospital because he survives. That's kind of where the story ends. And that leads on to the end of Watch, because in the end of Watch, we get reacquainted with Brady Hartsfield. For Finders Keepers, and I have to say, out of the 3 books, Finders Keepers was my favorite. Even though the main character was once again insane and obsessive, I kind of saw, or I could kind of connect with the main character. The story begins with a crime, and an author is killed. And he's killed by a man who is very angry with him because he fell in love with this character that he wrote. But the author ended up not only, he stopped writing the story, or he stopped publishing the story, but the final book that he did write of the character in which the criminal loved, he became a sellout. So the man was very angry with the author, John Ronstein. So he goes to his house, he murders him, he steals these moleskin type journals, and he discovers the fact that there is actually an unwritten story of the character that he came to love. But he committed another crime and could not read those moleskin journals. He ended up hiding the treasure, so to say, and he goes to jail. And he's in jail, I believe, for about 25 years, 35 years. And when he comes out, goes back to the area where he disposed of the moleskin journals, and they're no longer there because there's this teenager by the name of Pete Saubers. The teenager ends up discovering the books, and he takes them for himself. He doesn't really understand the treasure of the moleskins because there was actually money with the journals, but the criminal, he just wants the moleskins. He doesn't even want the money. He's so obsessed with this story and this character as if it's supposed to embody himself or something he lost of himself, or he got enthralled with this character, and it ultimately possessed his life. So when he comes out, he tracks down the teenager. He is going to hurt the teenager trying to get the books back. So in other words, the premise of the book is he's a fanatic fan, upset at the author for destroying his idea of his beloved character. He kills him, comes back for treasure. It's not there, and he's destined to find it. The book ends with the guy finding the moleskins, kidnapping, I believe, the sister. I can't really remember because I read these books in 2014 before the show even came out. And I actually didn't watch the show entirely. I watched maybe 3 or 4 episodes, and for some odd reason, and I loved the character they chose for Brady because I loved him as Mr. Frankenstein and Penny Dreadful, but I could not get past the incest. I couldn't. It just wasn't for me. I'd rather, read it in book form versus seeing it played out. It rubs me wrong. The criminal at the end of Finders Keepers ends up dying in a fire trying to save the book. I just thought it was a really, really good book because I get really connected to my characters. I don't think I would ever die for a fictional character or for a book, but it really played into or let me see the obsession of book readers. So I thought it was kind of cool. Another reason why I found Finders Keepers to be better than Mr. Mercedes and End of Watch is because End of Watch took a weird turn to me, kind of like on a sci-fi level, because End of Watch, we go back to Brady. He's in the hospital. He's constantly, being monitored. He can't move. They believe he's brain dead, but he's not. In fact, he's very well alive. Somehow he tapped into this power inside his psyche where he could actually remove himself from his body and enter other people. But before he does that, he somehow is able to control this video game. And all I can think of is the way that they describe the video game. It reminds me a lot of like Game Boys. But this video game was pink or something. And it was just a game. But somewhere embedded in the game was Brady's psyche and promoting people to commit suicide. And then eventually, like I said, he is able to remove his psyche to the point that he enters another human being and controls them. I'm not into books like that. I'm just not into books like that. I've noticed with Stephen King where he'll have a realism to his books and then out of nowhere just have this weird, I don't even know how to explain it. It's weird. When I read Bag of Bones, I thought the book was slow, but it was a good read. The dude's house was haunted, thought maybe the wife was saying something to him, and then it took a weird turn to where the house is being haunted by a African American woman who was raped. And anyways, that's for another book review. My overall rating of the trilogy of Mr. Mercedes, I have to say 2 stars, maybe 2.5, and that's only because Finders Keepers was like the saving grace of it all. It was kind of like a break in between the ridiculousness of Mr. Mercedes. If you personally like the books, like I said, I'm not here to demean anyone or say that your taste is awful. Maybe in the comments you can try to make me feel like these books were better than they were. But as for me, they're a pass. Maybe I'll, I don't know, watch the show and maybe the shows will be better.